Good morning and good evening, everyone, and welcome to this latest iteration of the Indica Books live hour. And we are doing this after a gap of a few weeks, but I'm delighted to share that we have a very, very interesting topic and a very knowledgeable author. And we are also joined by two authors who themselves have a great interest in this sphere. So, as you can tell from the background, we are going to be talking with Jijith NR. He is not only the author of two books, Rivers of Rigveda and the Geography of Ramayana, and he's also working on a third book that we will talk to him about. But when I said a very, very interesting topic and author, so let me tell you a little bit about Jijit. He is a former scientist with ISRO, and he has he when he was at ISRO, he contributed to the Chandrayaan. Okay, the Chandrayaan 1 orbit design and the GSLV launches of D2 F01 and F02, and he got and this is really great. He got appreciation from our late president, Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam, for his work on Chandrayaan 1 study phase. And so this is his, sort of his professional accomplishments, achievements. But coming to our, the topic at hand here, he also started and founded this this treasure trove of knowledge website called Ancient Voice. The website is ancientvoice.wiki.com. And believe it or not, it contains more than 25,000 pages. Yes, you heard it right. More than 25,000 pages on the Mahabharata, the Ramayana, the Vedas, and the Purans. And it has got, and we will talk to him about this. It has got self-made Bharatvarsh maps, analysis articles, lineage charts, which I find fascinating, and an analysis of more than 16,000 nouns and a whole lot. So he has been invited as a speaker at several international conferences, presented several research papers on the geography of the Mahabharata. He has worked as a mediator for the dating of the Kurukshetra war, which, as you would know, in several areas that becomes a lightning rod for a lot of heated debates. And we are not going to shy away from the debate. I am, in fact, looking forward to having a lively discussion amongst the four of us on that topic. But he is this author of two books, Rivers of Rigveda and the Geography of Ramayana. And it gives me great pleasure to invite Jijith to our Indica Books live Q&A. Welcome, Jijith.
Welcome.
Namaskar. Now, I told you we have four of us, right? So I'd like to introduce our two co-panelists. The first one is Pranshu Saxena. He is an author. He is a curator. He is an author to Unsung. He is one of the authors of the anthology published by Bloomsbury, Unsung Valor, Tales, Hidden Tales of Valor from the Mahabharata Kurukshetra War. And he is also a contributor to Flight of Deities, a work of fiction based on actual episodes of temple destructions that have happened over the centuries. It's inspired by Professor Meenakshi Jain's book, and she has also written a foreword to that book. I would strongly encourage you to get that book also, in addition to Jijith's books, Rivers of Rigveda and Geography of Ramayana. And we will be having a book giveaway of Jijith's books, so hang on there. Let me introduce and add Pranshu also to the live stream. Namaskar, Pranshu. And last panelist is Arun Krishnan. He is a PhD, okay, and an actual PhD. Okay, I'm not talking about I shouldn't say this, but he's not a liberal arts PhD. He's actually a proper, STEM PhD, and he works in the area of AI. So he is going to contribute to our eventual unemployment over the coming years. And he is the author of the Vatapi trilogy. He has written, and his first book has been published, Nandi's Charge, the Battle of Vatapi trilogy. He's working on the second book, and he promises us he will come out with those in short order of time. Welcome, Jijith.
Thank you.
and Arun and Pranshu. So, Jijith, let's start with you. You are the star of the show. First of all, when we talk about the Rig Veda, right, we're talking about the hymns there. We're talking about, we're discussing the philosophical, spiritual, religious aspects of the book. Uh, I know there is a lot of interest in some of the geographical descriptions, and those have been used to arrive at a tentative date for when the Rig Veda, the earliest parts of the Rig Veda were composed. So it is not altogether surprising, but do tell us what led you to write this particular book, Rivers of Rigveda.
Yeah, so as many would be knowing, it's something like my home or the focused point of study is Mahabharata. And my original intention was to write a book on the Mahabharata geography, which is the, you can say, uh, the home turf for me. But what happened is when I started writing the book on the Mahabharata, there was a lot of like you can say incoherence in the data, especially the data in the Mahabharata. So that once I write a book, I need to be a little more careful about what I put in the book. So I just looked at the older epics, that is Ramayana, and also into the Rigveda, so that I get my sequence very clear and correct. So unless this is my firm belief that unless you focus on the chronological and geographical data inside the Rig Veda, it will not be possible to write a meaningful book on the geography and chronology of Ramayana or Mahabharata. And that is why I decided to change the plan altogether and started writing a book on the Rig Veda itself in the beginning, so that both the chronology and the geography, which is will be my foundation for the subsequent books, that will be thorough. So that is one reason I have authored the book Rivers of Rigveda first. And of course, I had a lot of studies started from 2005 onwards on the Rigveda, as a information collection of information, because primarily not I am not looking at it as a liturgic text. And I was inspired by a lot of philosophical suktas in the Rigveda. I named my first son as Rutamanyu, and that is primarily because of my studies of Rigveda, like that.
Excellent. So essentially, what you're saying is that the Rivers of Rigveda was a book without which you couldn't have, proceeded with the other two books in this series, right?
Definitely, yes.
So, see, one of the things is that whenever such an exercise is done, one ends up as an author, as a researcher, one ends up finding things that are that were either hitherto undiscovered, or things that you end up looking at in a different light. Did this happen with you also?
Yes, yes. So it was a kind of a tremendous journey. Again, another ingredient for me to write the book was the COVID-19. So it has helped me with
How so?
the possibility of being in the house, because I'm also a full-time professional in capacity. So COVID-19, because of that, I was a little bit grounded in the house, and I was able to focus a little more onto the areas of research. So, and the favorable condition, because of that, I looked at it, the Rigvedic text very closely. And as you rightly pointed out, a lot of new insights came to me. And these insights is actually the soul of the book, Rivers of Rigveda, um, especially the location of certain rivers, and also discovery of a migration, which is which is not recognized in the previous studies of in the migration patterns, etc., based on Rigveda. So these are the kind of, I can consider as some of the most important contribution that I have in the area of the study of Rigveda.
So, can you give us an example, Jijit?
Yeah, yes. So some of the primary aspects, primary revelations or discoveries that I have included in the book Rivers of Rigveda. One is a very clear identification of the location of the Rigvedic Sarayu River. because it is a very different from the Sarayu River of Ramayana. I mean, that
Yes.
is another aspect I need to highlight to the audience. And there is no doubt among the scholars about that the Rigvedic Saravi is some kind of a western river. But where exactly is located was a kind of confusing for many scholars. For example, people following the out of India theory, they will identify it as river of Afghanistan, the Harayu River, etc. And some of people who are not very sophisticated understanding of the Rigveda, even they will consider it as the river of Uttar Pradesh, the Sarayu River, the tributary of Ganga. So between these,
Correct.
yeah, I had to look at very closely into data and identify the Sarayu River as a tributary of the Sindhu River and also as an eastern tributary. So that is one important thing, and it has the foundation, and it has allowed me to understand the equation of Ikshwakus in the Rig Veda, which is again another revolution because we had two branches of the Ikshwakus in the who migrated to the west and to the east, and Rama belonged to the eastern Ikshwakus, and the western Ikshwakus are very famous, familiar in the Rig Veda, like Trasadasyu and Purukutsa, and they were mentioned. The word Ikshwaku itself is a late word in the Rig Veda, mostly found in the late Rig Vedic period. But their original name was Trikshi. Trikshi is the name, and in the Puranas we are very familiar with the word Trikshi because Garuda is mentioned as Takshya, basically a descendant or a person who is a part of the Trikshi lineage. So like that, the many insights started coming in, and then finally I was able to connect it with the reference of Sri Rama, Rama in the 10th mandala of the Rig Veda, etc. So again, another revelation. And I have also able to explain how the Ikshwakus or the Trikshis, how they are able to finally end up in Uttar Pradesh, so that we have the Ramayana. So all these things
So,
got connected. Yeah.
so I know Pranshu is just waiting to dig into this issue. So let me ask you. So there are two things here. The first one is you mentioned the out of India theory, and the second one is you talked about the dating of the Ramayana, and I think okay. So let's start with the first one, and Pranshu, I think this is a lot of interest to you.
Actually,
So out of the out of India theory, right? So for a century or so, we have been fed the Aryan invasion myth, the Aryan migration story, which became then the sedimentation story, precipitation story. I think now they're trying to call it the Aryan tourism theory and all. But there is also a lot of evidence that there was an out of India migration. Tell us a little bit about that, and why should we take it seriously? What is the evidence in support of that?
Questions to me.
Yes, and Pranshu, to if you want to add to it.
yeah. So I mean, from the very beginning, right? How the migration patterns have flown. The migration patterns have mostly flown west from east throughout the history. The population of I'll give a very simple example, like Russians, right? Russians came into being around 6th century AD. The Norsemen, the Scandinavians, the modern Scandinavians, the Vikings came around 600 AD. Why? Because the Arabs conquered Persia. The Persians fled in all directions. Some fled towards the west. They became the South Slavs. Others fled towards the north and they became the Norsemen and the Russians. Others fled towards us. They are part of the Indian, and of course, they fled further down and part of the Malaya Peninsula, right? So the populations always when they move in such huge numbers, they always move in all directions, right? So when you're talking about the Aryans, right? And Aryans moving from the Rigved central, from around Saraswati complex, right? And I liked actually Jijith's book. He mentions that he uses the term Saraswati Sindhu Narmada. I would rather use the word Reva. The older name was Reva, right, of Narmada. So Saraswati Sindhu Reva civilization, and that is actually a very correct intention. It was right across with a desert in between, right? It was spread right across like that. And then we moved eastwards into the, as we moved into Vidhe, into the Kikat areas, into the eastern of India, and at the same time we moved towards the west. Whenever you are doing a migration, it's always multi-patterned. When the Yuchis, Kushans, when they left China, they also went up. They became the Siberians. Later on, moving right across, and basically becoming part of the Finno-Ugrians. So you always have this. If you throw a stone in water, it goes in all directions. So that's where the idea is. Now the second very important part of out of India, that I say people don't think of, that is our cattle has an extra rib. You cannot, we couldn't have, if we are so much connected to the cattle, to the cow, as we were talking about just a minute ago, that the moving of cows of the Om. If we are connected so much to the cows, how come our cows have an extra rib? They cannot, than the Western cattle, from the Egyptian and the other Anatolian cattle. How come we have an extra rib? The 60,000 years it takes to get gets that sort of a recession gene happen, and then an extra bone develop like that, at least. So obviously we didn't bring the cattle from the West. And
Jijith,
yeah, go ahead.
yeah, oh,
Yes.
sorry, over to you. A lot of the things that Pranshu has talked about to digest.
Yes. He is correct when he says the migration. Typically, if there are no kind of other constraints, the typically migration happens from a high dense area, population density area to all the four directions. That's absolutely correct, actually. And this is also one difference I have with Srikant Talagiri's OIT migration. Because I am myself and Srikant, both of us are correct, both of us agree on the migration from Saraswati to the western direction. But as Pranshu has correctly mentioned, I see migration from Saraswati in the eastern direction as well. And it is more prominent in the Ramayana and the Mahabharata compared to the Rigveda, because Rigveda more or less have the geographical horizon somewhere with Ganga in the eastern side, and then in the western side we have the Kubha river, that is the Kabul river today, and in the north we have the tributaries of Sindhu, like the Gilgit river and the Shyok river, etc., which is flowing in the Gilgit Baltistan and Ladakh areas. So, and in the south, of course, because of the Sindhu and Saraswati draining into the Southern Ocean, that is not to be confused with the ocean to the south of Kanyakumari, but the Gujarat Sea. So this is the
No,
kind
no,
of
Kutch.
geographical span of Rigveda. So it is not yet not very well captured anything that happened beyond Ganga in the eastern side. Anybody focus on Rigveda alone, this migration to the east is not very easily captured. But when I do a comparative analysis of Rigveda and Ramayana and Mahabharata, then this migration from Saraswati to the eastward is very clearly captured in there. And it is like, of course, these Itihasic poets are very innovative. Their poetry is very much highly innovative and imaginative. So they have encoded this information in a lot of poetic narrative, like Shantanu married Ganga, or many people don't know. Pratibha, Santanu's father, Pratibha, tried to marry, but later the decision to marry was given to his son Shantanu. So there is two generations who are proposed to Ganga, and the second generation of Shantanu, we get to know that Shantanu married. And similarly, in the Ramayana, you have
And also in your
uh,
book you highlighted this is not Ganga, it's Apaga. It's actually a
yeah,
tributary which actually moves away from the Ganga itself, right?
So let me
no,
just ask a question here. You say that this has been captured in very imaginative ways, and then, Prateep and then Shantanu. Prateep says that, you have sat on the wrong side of my lap, so therefore I can only treat you as a father, look at you as a father to my son and all. How do you interpret this in the context of this OIT?
yes, yes. So, see, OIT basically talk about out of India. So that part is the migration from Saraswati to the west. So now whatever I'm talking about is like just like Pranshu has mentioned, there was a westward migration from Saraswati to Satluj Bias complex, then to Ravi River, that is the Parushni in the Rigveda, and then Asikni, that is the Chenab River,
Yeah.
Vitasta, and that is the Jalam River, and then Sarayu, Sindhu, Kupa, like that. So the out of India is very clear, and those there are no debate on it. We are actually talking about what happened to the east of Saraswati. So that is what is getting captured in the Ramayana and Mahabharata, and it has no impact on the out of India migration from Saraswati to the west into Afghanistan, Central Asia, Iran, and to the finally to the Europe. So that part is very solid and very well captured in the Rigvedic mandalas. Whatever now I am talking about is the internal matter. It's like a domestic affair, if you want to say. The other one is the
So,
foreign affairs. This is the
no, but
domestic.
what
Yeah.
Abhinav was asking about was what's the difference between Prateep and
Yeah.
Ganga, and
Yeah.
again,
Because
Prateep's
what
son Bahalik, right? Prateep's older son Bahalik, he is basically, as Bulgarians and Armenians also acknowledge him as a forefather, father 15 nations to the west. So Prateep has already done the migration to the west. Now Shantanu marries Apaga Ganga, also called Radha, actually, at one place, because Bhisham is called Radhe also. So, so, uh, and this is a very interesting hint. Radha is also a name of Ganga towards the extreme east. So now, what happens with Shantanu and Ganga? They had 7 sons, and each son Ganga puts in Ganga. Each child is put in the mother itself, right? It's the safest place for the child. But we have several Ganga kingdoms emerged later various tribes claiming the descent from Ganga. The eastern Gangas who built the Jagannath temple and everything. The southern Gangas, even Kongu Nadu is there. And if you go further down into the into Cambodia and other Mekong, Ma Ganga, right? So there basically here's the difference. Poetically, the poet is trying to tell you Prateep did the western migration, Shantanu did the eastern migration.
See, I am actually very strictly following the data in the Rig Veda and the critical edition of Mahabharata and Ramayana. So I only see because the whatever later traditions about Jagannath. So I'm not focusing on that. So whatever information that is there inside the Mahabharata, because if there was an attempt of marrying Ganga, means it's basically an establishment of cities, etc., on the river Ganga. So Pratibha tried it. He has started establishing on Ganga, but finally it is in the second generation of, that is the son of Pratibha, that is Shantanu, got succeeded in establishing himself at Ganga. So if you want to, if you have to look at Ramayana to make it full, make full sense of it, there is an equivalent narrative in Ramayana, because you have Sagara. So Sagara's location I have identified as Saraswati, but people can have a different opinion on it. But nobody can dispute, because the grandson of Sagara's name is
Bhagir.
Amshumat.
Oh,
Amshumat.
so grandson Anshuman's, yeah.
Yeah. So Amshumat
Anshumati.
is very much corroborated with the Amshumati. Amshumati is the name of Yamuna River. So you have a kind of inclination there, like where there is a migration from whatever we can consider as Saraswati to Yamuna region. And Amshumat's son is Dilipa, and this is mentioned in the Ramayana critical edition that Dilipa tried to bring Ganga. So there was a kind of attempt there of bringing Ganga, and only in the second generation of Dilipa, because he died unsuccessful. In the second generation of Dilipa, Bhagirath actually is mentioned as bringing Ganga. So you have a kind of a corroboration between two generations of Ikshwakus and two generations of Kurus. So and like chronologically, the Ikshwaku thing happened before the Kuru thing, Kuru attempts. So initially,
so
you have this Dilipa attempting to bring Ganga, and Bhagirath finally succeeding in Ganga. So among Ikshwakus, the first king to succeed to establish himself in Ganga is Bhagirath, and the king who has attempted it before Bhagirath is Dilipa, and one more generation before they were at Amshumati, that is Yamuna. So there is a very clear, and of course Bhagirath's descendants Raghu, and then Aja, and then finally Dasharatha and Rama at Ayodhya, which is little more further eastward than Ganga in the Sarayu River. So we have 4 5 generations: Sagara, Amshumat, Dilipa, Bhagiratha, and then Raghu, Aja, Dasharatha, and Rama. So this many generation you have a eastward migration from Saraswati, crossing
So,
Yamuna,
Jijith,
Ganga, and then finally reaching the eastern Sarayu River. That is the famous Sarayu in the Uttar Pradesh. So
so Jijith,
yeah,
this this particular brings me to a very interesting segue that I want to start off with.
yeah,
So the Mahabharata mentions both the Kurus and the Ikshvakus, and the Ikshvakus, succeed in bringing Ganga down. And basically, you say that this essentially is one pointer to evidence that the Ramayana predates the Mahabharata. But how much of a time span separates the two? And you have a very interesting proposition based on this data. And I
Abhinav,
think this is where Arun,
sorry,
you have a
before we
question there.
even get, yeah, sorry, before we even get to that specific question, Jijith, can you talk a little bit about your dating of the Rig Veda, the Ramayana, and the Mahabharata period? Because there's a wide discrepancy among scholars. So it'll be good to hear that first, and then we can maybe you can take Abhinav's question on the how long from Rama to Krishna or the Ramayana to
yeah,
Mahabharata.
yeah, yes, yes. So for me, I have the foundation of my chronology is the Talakari's the chronology of Rigveda. So he starts the early Rigveda, that is the early mandalas of Rigveda from 3300 BC, and the ending the this 10th mandala at 1500 BC. So that is a span of between 3300 BC to 1500 1400 BC that Talagiri is putting. I have only a slight difference in the end date of 10th mandala, which I end at 1900 BC, so something like a 400 or 500 years earlier than Talagiri. So otherwise, the Rigvedic chronology, I more or less agree with Srikant Talagiri, except
So
the 10th
basically,
mandala.
you're of the opinion that this can be dated to start roughly 3300 BCE, right?
Yes.
Okay, so
And
roughly five
So,
and a half thousand years
so
ago
how
is where
does
the start is.
So I have a follow-up question then. How does that square with the traditional Indian dating of the Kali Yuga starting somewhere around 3100 BCE? What happens to that? Uh, can you just talk a little bit about it?
Yeah, maybe I will put all the dates and then I will mention about the Yuga chronology. Uh, so, uh, uh, so this we can say 3300 BC to around 1900 BC Rigveda, and 10th mandala of the Rigveda is ending at Shantanu. So naturally, you have a few generations like Shantanu, Vichitravirya, Dhritarashtra, then Pandu and the Pandavas. So this many generations, and then you have the Kurukshetra war. So definitely, it must be clear to everybody if 10th mandala is at 1900 BC, Kurukshetra war will be something like because 4 generation is typically approximately 100 years, like 25 years each of each like that. So more or less, I follow the dating of one astronomer, Ashok Bhatnagar, who has very conveniently dated the Kurukshetra war at 1793 BC, and it is aligning perfectly well with the Shantanu dated in the 10th mandala, which is ending at 1900 BC. So that is how between Rigveda and Mahabharata the chronology is established. And there is one reference to Rama in the 10th mandala, both like just like how Shantanu is mentioned as a contemporary king in the 10th mandala, Rama is also mentioned as a contemporary king in the 10th mandala. So we cannot, we have to, like, I have dated Rama somewhere closer, like see if for example Shantanu is at 1920 or 1940 BC, that same is the dating of the birth of Rama. So that is how the Ramayana is corroborated with the Rigveda. So these three texts, Mahabharata, Ramayana, and Rigveda, are corroborated into a single string of chronology. Now, as you very correctly pointed out, tradition have the yuga, the 4 yugas, and in my website, Ancient Voice, a lot of exercise efforts are put on the defining the yuga chronology. If you can, anybody can go and see that. So I have initially very early, like in 10 years or 20 years ago, I have very clearly understood that the 42 lakhs 20,000 long Chandra Yuga is not a historical. I mean, it is not useful for a historical chronology. Just like a 1 meter 1 meter scale is not useful for measuring a amoeba or a bacteria, or a 1 centimeter scale is not useful for measuring something like subatomic scale. So the that big yuga duration is a mathematical construct which very clearly emerged during the period of Aryabhatta, maybe a few hundred years before that. But in my website, the Ancient Voice, established in 2010, and for the last 5 6 years, I have focused on the Markandeya Yuga, which anybody focusing on my book, I mean, in my website will be very clear, which is 12,000 years, because Markandeya described the Yuga to Yudhishthira. Again, it is a Vanaparva, and by current studies, it is a late. It's not a contemporary to Yudhishthira, but a late passage in the Mahabharata, where 12,000 Yuga is mentioned, where there is no multiplication of 360. 360 is the number of days in the ancient solar year. So that number is not used for multiplying the 12,000 to make it 43 lakhs 20,000 Chaturyuga, which is very popular today. And as part of writing my books, that is the 3 books, I have explored very deeply the Mahabharata, and I discovered that the contemporary Yuga definition, which is used during the period of the Pandavas, is the Panchavarshiya Yuga, which is a Yuga of 5 years. So the 5 years is because the lunar cycle and the solar cycle, lunar
Right.
calendar and solar cycle, they just, you can actually corroborate them in 5 years, because there is a difference of lunar year is like 29 into 12. That is the number of days in a lunar year, and solar year is 30 into 12. So after 5 years, you can add two adhimasas into the calculation, and both the years get corroborated, and so you can actually bring together the lunar and solar year. And the Pandavas followed the lunisolar calendar, very very clearly described in a conversation between Bhishma and Duryodhana, when they have a doubt about whether the Pandavas completed 13 years of exile. So that very clearly shows the Panchavarshiya Yuga was the current or the Yuga that was being followed by Pandavas. And it is also the recorded in the oldest astronomical text, the Vedanga Jyotisha. And Dr. Asha Bhatnagar, he has who has also identified the 1793 basic date of Kurukshetra. He also have dated the this Vedanga Jyotisha to 1800 BC, a little bit chronological upgrade from the earlier dating of 1400 BC. So we have a very good chronological situation where the oldest astronomy text Vedanga Jyotisha is almost contemporary to Rama and Mahabharata, and because of which we can accept whatever the contemporary yugas defined in Mahabharata, especially in Ramayana secondarily, as very much historically real. Otherwise, if you follow with the 3000 years Mahabharata at 3100 BC traditional date, or even 5561 BC of Mahabharata, or Ramayana at 5114 BC dated by Saroja Bala, or 12,000 BC dated by 12,000 plus dated by Nilesh Hawk, all of them has to be considered as later addition, because Vedanga Jyotisha can only
No
be dated
iron. No
1400
iron
BC.
also. Also
Yeah,
no iron.
no iron, no iron. So almost 90% of the Mahabharata and Ramayana has to be considered as later poets adding it. Valmiki's and Vyasa's contribution will be just 1%, if you agree with those dates. For me, I am getting 1793 BC as the date of Kurukshetra war, and close to 1940 to 1920 BC, approximately in that range, for the dating of Rama and Shantanu. And both
So
of them fall within the Iron Age. Again, this is another, because the Iron Age was 1000 BC,
2000 BC.
like all over the world, Iron Age is considered 1000 BC. But only in India there is an exceptional case,
2000 BC.
which
Yeah.
is now discovered by our archaeologists, that Iron Age in India started in 2000 BC. So you
There
have
actually There's
Yeah.
also
Can
like a
I ask a
stele in
follow?
temple in Indonesia where Ganesh is teaching Bhim and Arjun, especially the Iron Age, iron smelting. So
Yeah.
there's a very and so even there also there's a connect that we actually had the iron first, which is also basically the black iron of India is
Mm.
there in the proverbs and the terms and everything. Like in Russia, there was an ancient, like from Persian, it came from the ancient Persian. It came taking one steel to India means ki it's like आप मेरठ वो आप मथुरा पेड़े लेके जा रहे हैं बेचने के लिए. मथुरा के पेड़े ऑलरेडी फेमस हैं. So that the idea that India was the origin of steel
Yeah.
and iron basically
Yes.
is there in the languages right across. It's from the Native American tongues also.
Mm.
This story is there. So if you
Correct.
if you take that story part of that, it is
Mm.
like we are the persons who basically discovered iron smelting,
Yeah.
or basically,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and especially the content basically which can be seen, like that iron steel pillar. Indian, they have an extra bit of mercury also in it, and an extra bit of phosphorus, which basically reduces the temperature. So we were able to achieve the higher smelting temperatures, able to smelt iron, basically because of the raw materials we had available.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
can I
Yeah. Yes.
ask a
Yes,
question?
Arun, please go ahead.
That's
I
linked-
have one more question, but I'll wait for you to ask your
Yeah,
question
sorry,
first.
Abhinav. This is just linked to the topic here. Um, if you look at, let's say, the book Lost River by Michel Danino, right, where he's got a lot of geological evidence, etc., allied or aligned with the Rigvedic descriptions of the Saraswati inflow and the Mahabharata descriptions of the Saraswati inflow. How does your study kind of does it fit into that narrative? Are there significant differences between what Michel Danino says in the Lost River in terms of Saraswati's age and dating, and your Rigveda and Mahabharata dating?
Yeah, yes. So absolutely, what I have understood is like there is a very good consensus that 1900 BC is the pivotal period where Saraswati desiccation is considered as a like more or less like it's a kind of a we can say it's a gradual process. Saraswati's drying up is a gradual process, but by around 1900 BC, almost half of Saraswati in the mid course it was dried up, and we can very clearly see in the earlier Rigvedic period there is a like a narrative. Very rare in Rigveda to have a Aitihasic narrative, but there is a narrative in the early Rigvedic period where Vasishta and Jamatagni were like living very close to Saraswati. They say that the river is flowing in full flow, and even in that early Rigvedic period itself, Saraswati's primary source was rain, and it is very clearly mentioned in the Rigveda, and it does definitely got some snow-fed tributaries. These are, but not major contributors of the water to Saraswati. And that realistic picture we are getting in the geology, and in the
Saraswant,
Mahabharata.
and
Yeah,
also Saraswant, that it
yeah,
is depending on the rain now. That
correct. Yes,
description in Rigved, that river Saraswati, there's a god Saraswat, a variation of
Saraswat.
Indra, you
Yeah,
can say,
yeah,
that
right. Yeah,
he is what is feeding the river Saraswati
yeah.
now, because and
Uh, the
and
clouds are mentioned as Saraswat, and then it is mentioned as the primary source of the river. So all this information that is required for a geologist, it is there in the early Rigvedic period. And then the in the literature after 1900 BC, for example, Mahabharata, you see a partially dried up Saraswati, very much aligning with the geological situation. So Balarama's pilgrimage, they exactly Balarama mentioned Saraswati as flowing very close to where it joins the like Southern Ocean. That is very close to Dwaraka currently in the this Ran of Kutch region, Sindh Ran of Kutch region. The Saraswati was having a little flow from Chamasodbeda, and then it is flowing into the ocean. And in the middle course, it's got totally dried up with only some wells like Udapana, which is only some wells. If you dig inside the dried up riverbed of the Saraswati, if you dig a well, you get water. So that well is also mentioned in the Balrama's pilgrimage. And once you move a little bit northward, again the river is started flowing. So from in the Haryana, that is in the Kurukshetra region, the river Saraswati was flowing, and it ends at the Vinashana, which is currently between the India-Pakistan border, in the Pakistan Punjab, very close to India-Pakistan border, that
Ajudan.
Vinashana. And after that, up to Chamaswat Peda, somewhat around 60% of the Saraswati river was dried up. That is a condition in which Balrama has noted it. So we see a dried up Saraswati in Mahabharata and a full flowing Saraswati in the early Rigvedic period, in the Rigveda. So
And
early
then
Rigveda. Yeah.
And also, there's an IIT Kharagpur study which was looking at the monsoon patterns using the Somoriri Lake in Ladakh. And so we see a 2300 BC to 1400 BC, 900 years of a very low monsoon period, which would
Yeah.
result in such a thing. And that's another reason why it cannot be an older date for Saraswati vanishing, is because
Yes.
then if those 900 years did not finish off Saraswati, then Saraswati was flowing earlier and then it vanished off earlier, because
Yes.
Mahabharat, the Saraswati vanished 3000 B. If Mahabharat date is 3000 BC, right, and
Yeah.
Saraswati vanished in 3000 BC, which other river, which should be mentioned in Rig Ved, vanished in that period of 900 years of sort of a multi dry period we have, right? So
Yes.
that's
Yes.
one thing. That's another. And actually, I wanted to talk to you about that 1793 date. So let me see. I just wrote down that the whole thing so that it's very crisp. So the number of so basically there are 240 solar eclipses every century. There are 150 lunar eclipses every century. So you take a period from 3500 BC to 700 BC. We have 4350 lunar eclipses, 6960 solar eclipses. Now, around 1000 BC, we have basically a clay tablet from a clay tablet recording these, solar and lunar eclipses in from Mesopotamia. The clay tablet records from the which basically mostly covers 2500 BC to 1000 BC. That's the area where it is more correct, more maybe accurate, but some of it goes further. So the U.S. Naval Observatory's interactive computer ephemeris, they created a whole database on it, and the weather patterns, and of course the eclipses, and when they will be visible from say Kurukshetra. And Jet Propulsion Laboratory in California was part of it. They created a code and program called Lodestar, written by Wayne C. Anala, and it was then checked for the and Wayne Mitchell then analyzed that data for the occurrence of a solar and lunar eclipse during Mahabharat. And so there are 6 such dates which come out when there was a solar and lunar eclipse within a 13-day Amavasya cycle. And there, those 6 dates are 3129 BC. The older date for Mahabharat comes from there, because that date is there in that. 2599 BC, 2056 BC, 1853 BC. There's a 60-year float in all of these. So that's where the 1793 BC comes in. 1708 BC, and the lowest one is 1397 BC, which Aurobindo, I think, mistakenly, and Aurobindo actually read the same, was probably looking at that time, the first time those clay records were getting available, and he calculated it to be 1194 BC, but it's most likely he was saying 1394 BC. So that's where these dates come from for your astronomical. That there has to be a solar and lunar eclipse within a 13-day Amavasya cycle, and it has to be viewable from Kurukshetra.
Yeah.
There
Exactly.
lunar
Exactly. So
eclipses which will be on the
yeah.
other side, right?
Yes, so I have also coordinated some discussion with 4 with archaeoastronomers, Vedavir and Manish Pandit and Ashok Bhatnagar, and then Ramamurthy, who was given a date of 1500 BC. And in that, all these astronomy corroborations were that basically the eclipses, and then the Balramal pilgrimage and Bhishma Pitama's demise, all these parameters. So it's like around 40 to 50 parameters, and then we are deciding on a date. Almost all the researchers have done it, including Nilesh, Manish, Vedavir, Ashok Bhatnagar, Ramamurthy, and Mohan Gupta. He has put that date 1950 that you mentioned. So around 12 researchers have exactly done almost all the things. So in terms of deciding on which is correct, we will, if we are unsophisticated, then you will have a lot of confusion, because all of them have done the same thing. And what we have done is we also brought in the archaeologists like Sanjay Manjul. So he has got an totally independent theory. He has not at all read Ashok Bhatnagar or anybody. No idea about whatever archaeoastronomers are going to present. And he come out with a date for Kurukshetra war 1800 to 1700 BC. And this was completely based on archaeology. So he is not using any elements in the astronomical correlation or eclipses or anything. Based on his studies on the OCP, that is work colored pottery,
Yeah.
and painted graveware, and it spread from Haryana to western Uttar Pradesh. Based on that, and of course, Sinoli chariot study also, he has found that a very healthy date for Kurukshetra war will be 1800 to 1700 BC. And this I have, as being a mediator of this particular conference, I noted this because we, for the first time in the history of our India, we got an archaeoastronomer and an archaeologist agreeing on a Kurukshetra war date. That is 1793 BC. And that I noted as a Dyaus Dhara consensus, because Dyaus represent the astronomy, Dhara is archaeology. So they are
Zeus.
converging on a date like that.
Zeus is the Zeus of the Greeks. Yeah.
So, Jijith, so we have spent a lot of time talking about the dating of the Mahabharat war, and interestingly enough, that is a part of your third book that you're working on, not really core to your first two books. So I think the inevitable question to ask is, tell us something about your third book.
Yeah, that's a Mahabharata book, right?
Correct.
So the thing is, the biggest revelation in the book Rivers of Rigveda was the location of Sarayu and the discovery about the chronological positioning of Rama. And I have also, if you look at read the book, there will be like a lot of very rare to identify rivers also I have identified. Just few words about the first book. And then Ramayana, the biggest revelation was about the how far the Rama has traveled to the south. And in the third book, Mahabharata, which I have engaged with almost a large part of my life, I was studying Mahabharata as in a detailed manner from 10 years of age, and it's you can say around 30 years I have studied Mahabharata. So almost everything that I have to talk about Mahabharata has come out as a research purpose. Around 7 research papers on Mahabharata I have come out, and so I mean, is there anything that I have not told, which is actually I'm writing the book in the book. So one thing, one kind of value addition that I will bring through the book Mahabharata is I am getting a very realistic dates of the Pandavas and Bhishma Pitamaha and even Veda Vyasa, very realistic date of all these people during the time of Kurukshetra war, as well as during the time of Janamejaya, because this is an anomaly in the Mahabharata. Just like geography is an anomaly in Ramayana, because later edition have added a lot of new place names in Ramayana and also renamed certain locations into the far south in southern India, etc. So it will create anomalies in Ramayana. So that anomalies in Ramayana geography I have corrected in my second book. In Mahabharata, the geography is straightforward. There is nothing to correct much in terms of geography. There are no surprises. But one thing I could get correctly is the age, realistic age of the Pandavas when they were fighting the Kurukshetra war. Because many people say they were 90 years of old. Some people say Bhishma Pitama is 200 years of old. Vyasa is 400 years old, etc. But I getting correctly based on critical edition of Mahabharata, based on all the cues that is present, which can allow us to arrive at the correct dates. That is the highlight of the third book.
I saw a paper
And
you had
how
written one about multiple Bhishams also, right? On ancient voice.
Yeah, those I have. These are the part of my earlier studies on the Bhishma Pitamaha and Vyasa, which is captured in my ancient voice website.
Because in
Where
Jan Harivansh, actually, they do mention that there are actually some more generations in between. So, I'll give you a brief background of that part. Is that it may not be the story of one generation, because see, both sides were Kaurav. Actually, Pandavas were the original heirs, right? So they were the real Kurus. So why are they called Pandavas? Is basically because they gave up that name. because they were burnt alive, right? Attempted to be burnt alive, so they gave up the name.
Yeah.
But the thing is, like for example, in Indonesian Wayang, where it reached there, and by the way, you had written once the name of Shakti was Shatayat, yeah, Satya, in your first book, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Shakti Satya. But see, in actually Wayang, he's called Shatakrutu. Shakti is called Shatakrutu. Same name, meaning Satya, father of
yeah,
Parashar. So anyway, so in Vyang, it is a story. It's from the very beginning. Says 12 generations: Manu Masya, Shatakratu, Parashar, Vyasa, Pandu, Yudhishthira as the sixth, Parikshit as the 12th. So there's a Yudhishthira as the sixth, Yudhishthira as the seventh. Yudhishthira, I mean, so that's what they're saying. Those five generations are sort of rolled in, and that's why we think that they are very old. And so the first Yudhishthira would still be a Kaurav, but the Yudhishthira who fights in Kurukshetra was a Pandav because they had diverged by that point in time. But that's again, it's just a speculation, basically based on how the Indonesians have preserved that tradition.
So,
yeah,
Jijith,
yeah.
when can we expect your book on the Mahabharata then?
I have, because of some coincidence, my first book on the Rigveda came uh, 2022 January, and Ramayana came 2023 January. So I want to keep it like a kind of. I felt like maybe January is something coming. I mean, for the book, so I'm trying to bring it in the January of 2024. But when I started writing, it's a half, almost 1/4. I just reached the point where the Pandavas are going to marry the Panchali. So I see that maybe whether I will be able to complete the book in January 2024, that is a little bit
Or split it.
doubtful, because it's a lot of things to write, because it's going to be bigger than the
Correct.
Ramayana book. But I will try my best to bring it together and release it January itself, like I did for the other two books. Like that.
So, Jijith, first of all, I think what you have done with the first two books, Rivers of Rigveda and the Geography of Ramayana, I think is path breaking in several respects. It brings together a lot of evidence, information, data analysis in one book, in two books, and furthermore, your book on the Mahabharata, I'm sure, is going to be equally, insightful and full of analytical data points. So we look forward to that. I do hope you are able to find the time that is needed, which is, as we all know, is a challenge, having full-time jobs, finding the time to write. And this is not lightweight writing that can be done. It requires a lot of time and patience and focus. So we hope you are able to finish it. In the meantime, thank you for coming on to this Indica Books live Q&A, and thank you, Pranshu, and thank you, Arun, for
One last question:
joining.
where do you think Sugriv was sitting when he was giving the 4 directions? Sugriv,
Yeah,
when he was
I
not giving
mean,
from Kishkinda, right?
yeah, I have mentioned that was the beginning where I sensed the anomaly, because in the Mahabharata, right, the four Pandavas went from Indraprastha, and if you plot that in the
Yeah.
map, you exactly get Indraprastha, Delhi as the center point. And in case of Sugriva's Vanaras, he sent 4 direction. It is idhar ka udhar. I mean, there is no way it is like center point is the
Ujjaini, I would
Kishkinda.
say, I
Yeah,
tried to map it once. Ujjaini comes out
yeah,
to be a more
but
better
yeah, right.
place.
It is, of course, one thing is certainly not Hampi, but
Hmm.
as you rightly pointed out, some random locations in the northern side. That's what you get.
Which
But
which
anyway,
which was preserving the data. I mean, some library or
yeah,
some
yeah.
university which was preserving the
Uh,
data. So they use their center point basically.
Yeah, so I have mentioned that there are multiple, because the Ramayana after the Vatmiki, there were a lot of contributors. Like for example, the bards of Bharata, the descendants of Bharata who are in the Gandhara region. So because some places they mentioned the eastern location as Saraswati, so that kind of inference can only come from Gandhara people. So Bharata's descendants were living in Gandhara, so they will say Saraswati is to the east. So all these things are combined together, and Sugriva's, it's a kind of a very complex. I mean, because of the multiple layers of geographical data mixed together, it's completely a kind of I will use
Or
the
it could
word
be
like
a poetic thing which is hiding
a
something more. You see,
yeah,
Treyartha Veda, right? It's maybe telling some other story to us, but We are just
Yeah, I
thinking of
have
just a guide map.
actually I have for example, for the eastern direction, I have mentioned where is a source. For the western direction that Sugriva mentioned, I have mentioned that this could be a source. All the sources are different. That doesn't
Yeah.
mean, because it's a disjoint set of geographical information combined together and presented to the reader. But nothing like that happened in the Mahabharata. That's what I said. Geography of Mahabharata is straightforward. Whereas in Ramayana, all these things happened. So we have to unwind that geographical knots. That is the thing happened.
Fascinating discussion. I wish we could continue for a longer time, but perhaps what we can do, Jijith, is have you come on board a second time, and we'll have an even longer discussion on along some of these topics. But in the meantime, thank you for coming on board. Wish you all the best in completing your book on the Mahabharata. And folks, if I would strongly suggest that you follow us on Twitter at Indica Books, on Facebook. There's a group, Indic Book Club. We are also on Instagram, so do follow us for updates. Join the conversation, and we will look forward to the next Indica Books Q&A. Thank you all. Thank you, Jijit.
Thanks, Judith.